See, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
The guy went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions.
I have no time for cultural totalitarianism.
We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate, with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akue, Saturday and Sunday afternoons on GB News. Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as me and my panel tackle some of the biggest topics hitting the headlines. It's a place for everyone's opinion. No one gets cancelled, but no one gets an easy ride.
Oh, she's on it today!
Be ready for conversations that are fierce, frank, and of course, fun. Every Saturday and Sunday afternoon from 4 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512.
Virgin Media Channel 604.
Freesat Channel 216.
Freeview Channel 236.
And YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB+ radio.
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon. Just after midday, Alastair Stewart and friends will be here in just a moment. But first, let's bring you up to date with the latest news. And our top story today, no survivors have been found at the scene of an explosion on Jersey. The authorities say the recovery operation will take weeks. At least 3 people were killed when a blast ripped through a block of flats in St Helier in the early hours of yesterday morning. 12 people are still thought to be missing. The Chief of Jersey Police, Robin Smith, says, sadly, more fatalities are expected.
Yes, an investigation or investigations are starting. That's inevitable, as you would expect. We deal with the very, very unusual in the usual way. We will want to understand how this has happened, and we are working and participating with all the services, including health and safety, to understand how this has occurred.
Well, in other news today, the Nurses' Union has offered to press pause on strike action if the government agrees to hold talks on pay. The Royal College of Nursing has accused the Health Secretary of failing to negotiate properly. And thousands of members are now planning to walk out on the 15th and the 20th of December. But writing in The Sun, Steve Barclay warned the action will cause significant risk to patients and added the door remains open for further talks, without specifying whether pay could be part of that discussion. Meanwhile, postal workers are staging fresh strikes today. The Communication Workers Union says the action could risk a Christmas postal meltdown. More strikes are planned over the next couple of weeks too, which the union has warned will create a huge backlog of post. Royal Mail says the money allocated to the pay deal on offer could be eaten away by the costs of strike action. Meanwhile, thousands of soldiers are preparing to stand in for public sector workers, including Border Force and emergency services staff, when they walk off the job this winter. Speaking to GB News, Lord Ken Clarke said bringing in the army to cover striking ambulance members when he was Health Secretary didn't go down well with voters.
This time was when I had a 7-month ambulance strike, and we gave the country a much better ambulance service where the strike was effective by bringing in the army. But that was hugely unpopular with the public.
And you can watch the full interview on Gloria Meets, where you'll find out the person behind the politician every Sunday at 6 p.m. On with the news, and the cold snap, which has been causing travel disruption across the UK, is expected to continue throughout this week as snow and ice sweeps across parts of the UK. The Met Office says overnight frost expected to last until Friday. Some rural communities could possibly be cut off, with possible power cuts and problems with mobile phone coverage. A 13-year-old girl is now cancer-free after she was treated with cutting-edge genetic engineering. Alyssa, who was suffering from leukemia, would have been facing end-of-life care if she hadn't opted for the pioneering treatment. Doctors at Great Ormond Street Hospital in London used an experimental type of therapy using T-cells and gene editing in order to wipe out her cancer cells. Scientists hope the research will lead to providing better futures for sick children. Ukraine's president says over 1.5 million people in the southwestern Odessa region in his country are without power following Russian airstrikes. Officials in Kyiv say electricity in the city will be restored over the coming days, but has warned complete restoration may take 2 or 3 months. Meanwhile, Moscow says its attacks are militarily legitimate and it doesn't target civilians. President Zelensky, though, has described the situation in the region as very difficult.
In total, Russian terrorists used 15 drones against the Odessa region, just during one night on Saturday. This is the true attitude of Russia towards Odessa, the attitude towards Odessa residents. Deliberate bullying, deliberate attempt to bring disaster to the city.
Harry Kane says he takes full responsibility for England's loss in the World Cup quarter-finals. The captain says he's gutted and it'll take some time to get over it. The team's now left the hotel in Doha in Qatar and was seen heading to the airport after losing to France last night. Gareth Southgate says he needs time to decide whether he has enough energy to continue as England manager. Supporters in Qatar have been reflecting on the results.
Just it could have went either way. Honestly, the game could have went either way. The whole thing, it was nip and tug between, but you got to take your chances, and I don't think we did that well enough. France were clinical, and now we're going home a week early, unfortunately.
Yeah, you feeling okay? Yeah, a little dejected, despondent, deflated. But you know, that's England. We've been here before. We know what to expect.
A little bit disappointed, but it's still, after that game, there's a lot of positives to take from it. So we're still positive about the future, and only 18 months to the Euros as well to look forward to.
With GB News, more news as it happens. Now let's take you to Alastair Stewart and friends.
Polly, thanks very much indeed. So as temperatures plummet, people are finding it harder to pay their bills. And in this weather, it's getting worse following the Met Office's cold weather alert. The UK Health Security Agency has recommended that vulnerable people heat their homes to at least 18 degrees Celsius. But according to the Joseph Rowntree Foundation, more than 3 million low-income UK households simply can't afford to heat their homes. But it's not just individuals and households that are being affected. Businesses have been hit too. And the Confederation of British Industry is urging the government to decide which industries get energy support. You may remember last time round they were kept waiting for a long time to know how much they would get, whilst we were told fairly quickly. Well, the head of UK hospitality, Kate Nichols, has also said that 250,000 jobs in the industry are at risk without more help on energy bills. She says, and I quote, "These businesses are incredibly fragile. Energy costs have pushed businesses to the very brink overnight. This week also saw the controversial approval of a new coal mine in the UK. But whilst some have welcomed the news, others have not. Green Party MP Caroline Lucas has said what we are seeing is nothing less, I think, than a climate crime against humanity. Now, to be crystal clear, and we do like balance here, Michael Gove's decision to green light the reopening of an old coal mine in Cumbria at Whitehaven is not the return of old father coal to the UK energy mix. It is, however, a potentially important move in the UK's growth strategy because it will create 500 jobs producing coking coal for the steel industry, both here at home and abroad. It has widespread local support, but inevitably some say it was a dangerous signal that the UK is perhaps willing to use the dirtiest of fossil fuels, albeit for a specific industrial reason. Industry certainly wants it, and local folk want those jobs. However, it did come just a few days after Rishi Sunak signalled support for more onshore wind farms. So today we're examining what is afoot on both industrial and growth strategy and energy, with experts from all sides of the argument. We'd also love to hear from you. Do send your thoughts in, gbviews at gbnews.uk, or tweet me directly or tweet at gbnews. And I will share some of the best as we move towards 2 o'clock. So there's Facebook available as well. Now, before we get into that discussion, a week is a long time in the world of politics, of course, and this week we saw more Conservative MPs announcing that they will not be standing in the next general election, including, back from the jungle, one Matt Hancock. So to bring us up to date on all of the latest political news, I'm delighted to be joined once again by Olivia Utley, live here in the studio with me, GB News political reporter. Not quite lemmings over the cliff, but the numbers are getting quite hairy and scary in terms of signals to the electorate.
Yes, and what's quite interesting about the MPs who have said that they're not going to stand at the next election is that most of them are very young. 50% of them are under 40, and one of them is Deanna Davidson, who is a 29-year-old minister. So the fact that she's standing down is pretty much unprecedented. You'd feel like that's someone, you know, new in their career who would want to make an impact. But what MPs are worried about, of course, is that they're going to lose their seats at the next election, and they would rather jump before they're pushed. I've also heard of a wave of SPAD, special advisors, resigning now because what they're worried about is losing the election, and then a load of SPADs trying to get into the same sort of private sector jobs at the same time. Yeah. So they're just thinking we may as well jump now.
Absolutely. Well, funnily enough, an old chum of mine of that world said to me the other day that someone who's stepped down as an MP is a slightly more attractive commodity than someone who's been voted out by the electorate.
Yes, exactly. That's definitely true. And I think that's probably true of the SPADs as well. But as you say, it's a bit of a sign to the electorate, and it's not good for the morale of the Conservative Party in general.
No. We talked yesterday about Mick Lynch saying that he would be willing to enter into talks if senior ministers were prepared to meet with him on behalf of his RMT union. We hear the same mantra this morning from the Royal College of Nursing. They could modify their strike action, which everybody is terrified at the prospect of, to be perfectly clear, if Rishi Sunak himself is prepared to talk. So it's good to talk, but not if you're number 10.
Yes, well, the rhetoric from Pat Cullen, the head of the Royal College of Nursing, this morning was sounding quite sort of conciliatory, saying that they would, in theory, be prepared to drop the strike action if Steve Barclay talks seriously. But actually, the crux of what she's saying isn't very much different to what we've heard. And as we know, the two sides are pretty deeply entrenched in their positions. One couple of interesting things that sort of bring this story on is Wes Streeting has done an interview with the Sunday Telegraph today, talking about how, well, it's quite a big interview, really. The fact that he's speaking to the Sunday Telegraph at all in itself is quite interesting. You wouldn't have seen that under Jeremy Corbyn's government. Shadow government. But Wes Streeting, the Shadow Health Secretary, is saying that the NHS must reform or die, which is bold language. And the Telegraph has headed it as Wes Streeting as vows to take war on the unions.
Yes.
So that makes Rishi Sunak's position some could say kind of easier because if the unions are worried that even Labour wouldn't take their side, they've got a bit less negotiating power. But it's interesting in itself. Streeting is a big hitter. He's considered on the right of the Labour Party. And of course, you've got someone like Angela Rayner on the left of the Labour Party who's saying that the strikers are doing good work. But the fact that Labour isn't even 100% behind the unions is quite an interesting development, really.
Yeah, watch this space with interest, as you always do. Olivia, great to see you. Thank you very much indeed. Olivia Utley there, GB News political correspondent. On the energy agenda, I'm delighted to say that my first guest is Clive Moffat, who is the founder and former chair of the UK Energy Security Group and also a former advisor to Her Majesty's government, indeed, on energy security. Contradict me if you want, but was I right in saying at the top of the programme the Cumbria decision has absolutely nothing to do with energy security or energy supply? This is purely an industrial decision for the steel industry who want coking coal.
Alastair, you're exactly correct. It's nothing to do with energy security. It's actually a very practical solution to the demand for coking coal for steel. We're going to need steel to make things.
On the wind farm decision, or not a decision, but the suggestion from Number 10 that government opposition to more wind farms was perhaps waning a little so long as people had local support for them and that local objections kind of slipped away. Potentially that does have more to do with building up our supplies and our energy security, our domestic supplies. Do you welcome that?
Not really. I think it was a mistake for the Prime Minister to say at COP27 that renewables were essential for energy security. They're not. I mean, the fact is that you can build as much wind turbine generation capacity. You will always be, it will be intermittent. There isn't the technology available to store the power that's generated when it's not being used in the grid. And at the end of the day, we're going to need more investment in flexible gas generation to keep the lights on when wind isn't blowing.
So, but how could we do that within the United Kingdom? I mean, the biggest deal that's been all over the newspapers is that we had to go to the United States of America and buy huge volumes of gas from them, much of which was, of course, extracted via fracking, which we ourselves are not prepared to indulge
Slightly
in.
amused by that. This long-term contracts for gas, it's actually not governments that contract with each other for gas exports and imports. And I still fail to see how this detail of that is going to work out. The problem with any kind of long-term gas contract is that at the moment, let's just go reflect a little bit. The actual spot price of gas in September compared to now is significantly lower. It fell nearly 50%. In the last few days, it's climbed up again with speculation. The problem with long-term contracts is that I can't imagine an American exporter of LNG wanting to lock into any kind of long-term deal at a price which is flexible, more likely significantly higher than what we have now. So I don't really see any advantage in long-term gas contracts.
There's been talk in government circles as well in recent times about looking again at the North Sea in terms of producing our own natural resources from the North Sea. Is that game pretty well up now?
I think there are a number of things. If you're looking at the short term and longer term, I think in terms of keeping the lights on over the winter, we need to hear more from Grid. I'd just like to go reflect on this point about exactly what measures they're taking and what they're costing consumers to actually ensure that major industries are going to curtail their demand for power and gas at a time of peak demand. And also, I'd like to know more about the National Information Strategy or promotional campaign that was announced finally to inform the public about what basic steps they could do to help control their own demand. Looking longer term, Alastair, I think, yes, we need more gas production, and I personally would be in favour of more North Sea incentive as well as selective fracking, where there is consent and where there is an obligation on developers to sell that gas, most of that gas, into the UK supply market. More particularly, I think that we need in the next 5 years or so, if this situation of curtailments on demand is not going to continue, we need to have some greater gas storage, and we need to have some significant more, as I said earlier, flexible gas generation capacity.
Great to talk to you, and great wisdom there and background for us as well to understand what may or may not be going on, and what you would like to see government considering. Clive Moffat there, the former advisor, as I said at the top, to the government indeed on energy security, and throwing before you there the other key point, and that is that controlling demand is also very important and not an exhausted strategy. Well, on that theme, joining me now, I'm pleased to say, is Ian Thompson, who's the Operations Director of Energy Support and Advice UK. Ian, you've been seeing an enormous increase in demand for support recently because people are finding it tremendously difficult to curb their demand, which we were just talking about, and those prices are still astronomical and they're just finding it tough making ends meet. What is your advice and guidance to people in those circumstances?
You've got to keep in touch with your suppliers, keep the pressure up, making sure that you're curbing your demand as much as possible, heating the person rather than your entire home. We've seen very, very much an increase in demand for top-up payments, particularly for those customers who are on prepayment meters. There is lots of government support being offered to the public with reference to £66 payments every month for the 6 months of the winter time. Although what we are seeing is, unfortunately, these payments in a large majority of cases aren't getting through. Some customers waiting up to 6 hours on the telephone to try and get in touch with their suppliers. And furthermore, they're waiting for these payments that were promised October, November, December. Many customers are still waiting for their October payments, which is obviously putting an awful lot of pressure on these people to be able to afford to have energy to supply their homes with power and in particular heat.
And I guess most of them would simply want better supply, and if there's more supply in the marketplace, then the price might just gradually, slowly slip down. As an observer of these matters, are you confident that the balance between environmental considerations and local democracy and energy need is in balance at the moment?
I think that's very difficult to predict at the moment, Alastair, because the situation is the market itself is very, very volatile. And the local environmental considerations and government in particular are finding it very, very difficult to keep up. So that remains to be seen, unfortunately. I don't think prices are going to change, certainly not a downward trend for the significant future, and certainly not over this winter.
It only will if we get a lot more from somewhere. Ian Thompson, great to talk to you, and thank you for the work that you do helping those who are in desperate need right now. Ian is the Operations Director of Energy Support and Advice UK. Google him, great website, lots of really, really good ideas there. Delighted to be joined by an old friend of the programme, Lord Karen Billamoria, the Vice President of the Confederation of British Industry. The CBI have said that they are really concerned right now, not only about those bill problems that Ian was talking about that we all face, but the bills that business is facing as well. We know that small businesses had to wait a heck of a long time last time round when a support and help package was unveiled. I guess if the CBI are banging the drum now, it's big businesses as well, like the hospitality industry. How grave are those concerns, Karen?
So we're in a very serious situation at the moment. We've got stagflation, which is not just low growth, but we're probably in a recession combined with inflation at over 10%. We know historically how to try to deal with inflation. We know historically how to try to deal with a recession. But to try to deal with both of them at the same time is a huge challenge. And combined with that, we have a winter now it's one problem after another. The strike almost every day leading up to Christmas. The problem with strikes is not only are they disruptive to everybody, to consumers, to working people, they disrupt businesses. The hospitality industry, December is disproportionately the most important month in the whole year, by far, the build up to Christmas. And if you disrupt that, I mean, there are various calculations of £1.5–2 billion of business lost by hospitality who've suffered enough already. And we're saying you've given us some help with energy, maybe reducing the cost by 40%. That's coming to an end in March. What about giving us some more help? What about some more help with VAT for restaurants and pubs? There are pubs and restaurants that are closing at the moment. They need that help desperately. So that the situation with the government at the moment in dealing with this is what is happening now is not enough. And I think they need to do more. Otherwise, we will see businesses closing down. And what we're in now, I'm sorry to say this, is with a recession, with inflation, with stagflation, with strikes, it's a vicious cycle. It's literally a downward spiral, and we've got to stop that downward spiral. Now, the good news is in America, inflation seems to be coming down. Even in the Eurozone, there are hints that inflation might be coming down. If that's the case, that's really good news because inflation is the big enemy at the moment. And we know if inflation can come down next year, then we can have growth. And this is what the autumn statement did not deal with. You went from one extreme of the irrational exuberance of Liz Truss and Kwasi Kwarteng's mini budget in September to the other extreme where we've put up taxes to the highest level in 70 years, which is the worst thing. It stifles growth, stifles recovery. And on top of that, you've got cuts. Now, where's the growth plan? And we're saying to the government, you need growth. And growth means investing in skills. Growth means investing, encouraging companies to invest, incentivizing inward investment from abroad. Growth means investing in skills and lifelong learning. Growth means the apprenticeship levy being reformed that desperately needs to be reformed. There's none of this. And we need to see that emphasis on growth right now. And the government is saying, wait till the budget in March, April, then we'll do all this. Well, I hope it's not too late by then, because we need the help now. We need this action right now.
Let me ask you whether or not the reopening of the coal mine up in Cumbria ticked some of those boxes in the list that you've just articulated, in the sense that it creates 500 jobs, it creates coking coal that the troubled UK steel industry desperately wants. It also creates an export commodity, which has got to be good for growth in the midst of a recession. Did you approve? Did you give it a thumbs up, or you have environmental concerns?
I spent 1.5 out of the 2 weeks at COP26 in Glasgow a year ago. And I can say that the transition to net zero is absolutely crucial. And we as a country are completely committed to that. 60% of the FTSE 100 companies have committed to net zero. Companies on their own accord, 9% of businesses of all sizes have at least one climate-related target. But what I always say is this is not an on-off switch. You can't suddenly switch off from fossil fuels to renewables and alternative energy. It's got to be a transition. And this coal mine is providing coal for steel plants. It's coking coal. It's not coal that's going to be used to heat our homes. It's for a very specific purpose. In the same way that we have more gas produced in the North Sea, that may be required during the transition. And at the same time, and this is the mistake people make, they're saying, no, we're going through stagflation. We're going through all these problems at the moment. Let's stop all the investment in greens and renewables. No. We've got to double down on them. We've got to be more self-reliant. We've seen what's happened with Europe and their reliance on Russia. We need to be able to, the more we have investment in wind, the more we have investment in solar, the more we have investment in hydrogen. Can you imagine if all our homes are heated through the pipes that we have upgraded with clean hydrogen, zero emissions in all our homes? 29 million homes. That is possible. Sure. Birmingham University, where I'm Chancellor, we've invented the world's first retrofitted hydrogen-powered train. So the technology is advancing. Rolls-Royce have these small modular reactors. These plants can power 1 million people with electricity. They take 5 years to set up. We haven't even started building one of them. I say to the government, let's start building them now. So we must continue with all this.
OK, Karen, as always, thank you so much for giving us so much of your time, breaking into your weekend to talk to us. But there's a terrific agenda there from Karen Billamoria. If you agree with him or disagree with him, then do let us know what you would like to do to double down on making sure that we are energy sustainable, but we also nod towards our environmental concerns. As Karen said, a lot more needs to be done on that front. We're not just waving hurrah, hurrah for coal or any of that at all. You're watching and listening to Alastair Stewart and Friends, with lots more coming up on today's programme as the energy crisis that we've already been discussing so far this afternoon bites even deeper. How can we be even more savvy when it comes to saving money, but also trying to keep warm this winter? We're discussing that right next. But first, a quick break.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not
believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
The national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8".
My instincts was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other pay-per-review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
You're with GB News. The headlines this hour. Jersey officials say the recovery effort following yesterday's explosion in St Helier will take weeks, not days. At least 3 people were killed when a blast ripped through a block of flats in the early hours of the morning. 12 people are still thought to be missing. The Chief of Jersey Police, Robin Smith, says sadly more fatalities are expected. Also today, the Nurses' Union has offered to press pause on strike action if the government agrees to hold talks on pay. The Royal College of Nursing has accused the Health Secretary of failing to negotiate properly, and thousands of members are now planning to walk out on the 15th and 20th of December. Writing in The Sun, Steve Barclay warned the action will cause significant harm to patients and added the door does remain open for further talks. Meanwhile, postal workers are staging fresh strikes today. The Communication Workers Union says the action could risk a Christmas postal meltdown. More strikes are planned over the next couple of weeks, which the union has warned will create a huge backlog of post. And the cold snap, which has been causing travel disruption right across the UK, is expected to continue throughout this week, with the Met Office saying overnight frost is set to continue until at least next Friday. A yellow warning for snow and ice is in place for Scotland, as well as other parts of Wales, Northern Ireland and southwestern England. And Harry Kane says he takes responsibility for England's loss in the World Cup quarter-finals last night. The captain says he's gutted and it'll take time to get over it. The team's now left its hotel in Doha in Qatar and is on its way to the airport after losing to France 2-1 in last night's nail-biting game. England manager Gareth Southgate says he now needs time to decide whether or not he has enough energy to continue in his post. That's it from us. The latest headlines again for you at the top of the hour on TV, online and DAB+ radio. For now, you up to date. Let's get back to Alastair Stewart and friends.
Polly, thank you very much indeed. This is Alastair Stewart and friends here on GB News, TV and radio and online. And the time is 1:30. You have indeed been getting in touch with us on energy, 12:30, on energy and on other matters that we have been discussing on that I told you we would be discussing later on as the day unfolds. Arthur begins the conversation saying, it's currently -4 outside. I have had to turn my heating off. I'm a 74-year-old pensioner. My gas and electricity bill for the first 10 days of this month is my allowance for December and half of January's as well. I just cannot afford energy despite all of the help being provided. Rex says making steel is energy intensive and can't be made using green energy. Here it would be better to import it from countries with better to do it here than import it from countries with dubious mining practices. So there we are, frontline observations and then a broad policy view as well. Do keep those views coming in, particularly tips on how you're managing if you are, problems if you're not. We'll do what we can to help. Keep those views coming in at GBViews, at gbnews.uk or via Twitter. Now, Christmas, believe it or not, is just 2 weeks away, and after a difficult few years, where better to cheer yourself up than at a Christmas market? And the ones in Manchester have been thanked. Have been ranked the best to visit in the UK, beating competition from Birmingham, Nottingham and even Edinburgh. Our North West of England reporter, Sophie Reaper, paid them a visit to see what all the fuss was about.
A healthy squirt of festive cheer, maybe with some sprinkles on top. After a few difficult years, a good Christmas is what we all need. And what's more festive than a Christmas market?
It is very, very interesting to just come. You can do so many different things. You know, you can do your Christmas shopping, or you just have like a nice time hanging out with your friends. And I think it's just a good place to go. And it's something different than going to a restaurant or a bar like everybody does all year long, isn't it?
There are, of course, Christmas markets to be enjoyed all over the UK. But this year, the ones in Manchester have been voted as the best.
So special because it's been going for years and years, and each year I think we bring something different to the table. It's changing all the time with new and exciting food stalls, craft stalls and areas as well for people to come and enjoy.
Since they began in 1998, the Manchester Christmas markets have always been a highlight on the calendar. But what is it about this festive extravaganza that sees people coming back year on year?
We approach it with great enthusiasm, and Manchester people and people in the North West just love markets, and they love Christmas markets. 220 Christmas stalls, over 9 sites in the city centre, and there's something here for everybody.
For many people, the last few years have proved difficult. But this Christmas, the markets in Manchester are hoping to bring back some of that festive spirit.
We've had a horrible time over the last few years, and there's a lot of dark news in the world, and we really want to cheer up and connect and be with our friends, be with our family, and just try and get through all the problems we've got. And this is the perfect place to cheer up.
But what are the stall holders themselves expecting, given the current cost of living crisis?
We just have to go for it and see what happens, don't we? Like, hopefully people still want to come out and enjoy the Christmas markets and have a nice evening or day out here, so that's all we can hope for.
Because that's what Christmas is all about. Hope. From a very merry Manchester, Sophie Reaper, GB News.
Magnificent Manchester Yuletide. Winchester's got a nice one as well, but it's a little bit smaller, to be honest, than the Manchester one there. But look around, because you can also get what you want and help support local businesses and local producers as well, as you'll learn from an item that's just coming out. That really matters at this time of year. You're watching and listening to Alastair Stewart and Friends, with plenty more still to come this afternoon, including the horticulture sector facing serious supply chain issues if food security is not made a priority by the government. I'll be talking to one of those affected who also has the inside track on what the NFU want done about it on behalf of all farmers. But first, before we get there, another quick break. We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online, across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
There's a guy who went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions.
I have no time for cultural totalitarianism.
We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate, with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akue, Saturday and Sunday afternoons on GB News. Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as me and my panel tackle some of the biggest topics hitting the headlines. It's a place for everyone's opinion. No one gets cancelled, but no one gets an easy ride.
Oh, she's on it today!
Be ready for conversations that are fierce, frank, and of course, fun. Every Saturday and Sunday afternoon from 4 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. Over a drink, we have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512.
Virgin Media Channel 604.
Freesat Channel 216.
Freeview Channel 236.
And YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB+ radio.
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello and welcome back. It's exactly 12:41. You are watching and listening to Alastair Stewart and Friends here on GB News TV and radio and, of course, online. Thanks for joining us if you just have. Thanks for being with us since we started at noon. We are here right up until 2 o'clock. Now, the unfortunate image of empty egg shelves in UK supermarkets and with farmers under huge pressure due to soaring energy costs and workforce shortages, the National Farmers Union president, Minette Batters, warns that other farming sectors could soon be under threat from immediate supply issues. Derek Wilkinson joins me live now to discuss it. Derek is Vice Chair of the National Farmers Union, Horticulture and Potatoes Board. It is quite unusual to hear the farming industry, which is one I know a little of and love very much, talking about supply chain issues. Is that supplies to you for what you need to run your businesses, or is it supply of what you produce to me and the supermarkets?
It's predominantly in the supply of products to us. So we've got massive inflation in things like fertiliser, energy costs, and the big one for me, being a horticultural field vegetable grower, is supply of seasonal labour.
And Nanette and you have both said you want the government to take action, but in terms of that and also fertiliser and the rest of it, I mean, what can the government do?
Well, certainly in our sector, the one thing the government can do is to free up to the seasonal worker permit scheme. Currently, we have permits for 38,000 people. We, as an industry, believe we need 60 to 70,000 people total. So we need that scheme expanding immediately. We're sat here now, beginning of December, and we still don't know the full allocation for next year, which is making business planning very difficult. And simply, as a result of that, growers are cutting back. We saw shortages of labour this year. The NFU claims that there was approximately £60 million worth of food destroyed in May and June due to labour shortages. For me personally, I lost £250,000 worth of asparagus and spring onions in May this year.
Over that I can understand in terms of your picking workforce, but that's not going to do anything at all to help you on your other input problems, like you mentioned fertiliser and obviously the cost of energy. What do you want the government to do there?
Well, fertiliser is obviously a global market, but as is energy. But I mean, what the government could be doing, they could be extending the support with energy costs beyond early next year. So things like that.
I mean, Christmas dinner is looking like a kind of list of problems for the farming industry. You can imagine walking into dining rooms or kitchen or seeing kitchen tables in homes all over the country. We know about the problems with turkey and other poultry because of avian flu. We understand that from horticulturalists like yourselves that it may be even stuff like potatoes and Brussels sprouts, all the other bits and bobs. Those tables run the risk of being a little bit empty, don't they?
Absolutely they do, because growers are cutting back on production due to, in the main, to the uncertainty. They've got massive inflation. We've had 25-30% on inflation, which we need to pass on through the supply chain. But of course, we're in the cost of living crisis. That's difficult to achieve. Growers are cutting back for next year and will grow less risky crops, broadacre crops, wheat and oilseed rape, etc., where the prices have inflated massively over the last 18 months. So they will go for more certainty.
And that is dreadful long-term news for us as consumers, but also for you as suppliers and producers. Because if it's got to come in from abroad, nobody likes that. We like to try and support you guys, and it does tend to be slightly more expensive. Answer me this, if you would. We had Aldo Zilli, the brilliant chef, in a couple of weeks ago, talking about alternatives to the traditional Christmas lunch/dinner, and instead of turkey, to look at other poultry, to look at beef, to look at pork, to look at fish, etc., etc., etc. As an industry, are you up for those switches in demand?
Well, as an industry, we will always adapt to the markets and produce what the customer wants. So, yes, but we believe most people still want the traditional Christmas lunch.
What are you having for Christmas lunch or dinner?
Hopefully, I will be having turkey.
Well, I hope that you have a terrific time and that you all have a very, very good Christmas. And seriously, because we do have our rural spotlight and we keep across what's going on in your industry, because it matters to everybody watching and listening, but also it's just a group of brilliant men and women doing very important work on behalf of the entire country. So from all of us here, genuinely to all of you, the best of luck and hope it comes good and that you get those supplies that you need so that you can keep those wonderful supplies coming to us. Thank you very much indeed for joining us, indeed, and best to all, Derek, at the NFU. Now, that was Derek Wilkinson, who is the Vice Chair of the NFU's Horticulture and Potatoes Board. So those are some problems on the food front and on the menu front and on the lunch and dinner front. But the festive season also brings other issues as well. It's supposed to be full of joy. But there's also a downside to the holiday season. Home robberies happen more in the lead up to Christmas, and according to LV General Insurance, 67% of theft claims reported last December were home thefts. They also reported that claims are already up by 4% this year compared to last. So how can we protect our homes from burglary during this time of year? I'm pleased to be joined in the studio by someone who, for his own good reasons, perhaps he shouldn't know. It's Michael Fraser, who himself is an expert on how to get stuff that doesn't actually belong to him, because he used to do that for a living. But he has become an expert, working closely with the police, I'm delighted to say, an expert on how to avoid becoming yourselves a victim of crime. And here he is to tell us all. Some of it's blindingly obvious. My younger son screamed and shouted at me the other day because I'd put both my house keys and my car keys on a hook in full view of the kitchen window. He said, "You don't want to be doing that."
That's
the
correct.
accent was rather like that, I must confess. What are the other obvious things? Now, presumably, people who are out there and have lifty fingers professionally, they know that the houses are going to be full of gifts and extra booze and, if they're lucky, food and stuff like that. Is that why December is so vulnerable?
December is always vulnerable because we've got the dark nights. People tend to put on Christmas lights, which are in the front window, attracting the opportunist. And what happens is you put your presents around the tree. Yeah. The normal general public don't tend to think about security until something happens. They're burgled, or next door is, or a relative. So it's good to have like 2 locks on the front door. Don't put keys on show. Take the calendar out the kitchen. That gives dates of when you're actually out over the Christmas season. And a cage on the inside of the letterbox to stop letterbox fishing. Very popular with the opportunists.
That's the old coat hanger going through and lifting the keys off.
It's actually an extended pole that will go through the front door, lift the bag, all keys off the side, bring them back down the pole, through the letterbox, and they're off with your pride and joy, your car.
One of the other heartbreaking episodes that we normally read about at this time of year is someone who's got all of their Christmas prezzies in the car, on the back seat there for all to see, and that's like another great big magnet. It's like you're saying, those lights on saying, hey, this house is celebrating Christmas, so we're going to be full of everything.
It's standard practice. We go Christmas shopping, we load the car up, we leave the car as it is, and it attracts the opportunist again. It's just exactly as I've come in today. I'm looking at all the cars. 99% of us parallel park. Cars are dead straight. 1% will turn the wheels into the gutter to stop that car being moved. You'll find that 1% won't have their car stolen. The 99% of us who parallel park the car will go. Christmas presents in there, dead giveaway, easy to get in. You're talking 30, 35, 40 seconds to empty a car of all the presents.
So the two big headlines, it seems to me, listening very carefully to what you've said, is don't advertise that you are actively engaging in Christmas, and do the obvious little things that just make it more difficult for someone to come and do you over.
Well, I always say, look at your own property. Imagine you lose the keys to your house. How would you get in? Because believe you me, the opportunist will find that way very, very quickly. So it's all about security. Be conscious of what's going on. Don't be in a massive rush. So you can make sure these things are safe and you have a good Christmas.
The other thing that struck me as interesting on that introduction to our conversation with the facts and figures from L&V. Other insurance companies are available. But if you do get done over, the first thing the insurance company wants to know is if you've got a crime number. You work with the police on this campaign, having gone on the straight and narrow. I read recently that many members of the public are deeply concerned that the police just don't take burglary or petty theft seriously.
No, the police do. They take it very seriously. The problem you've got, it's just like everything. They haven't got the resources. And a crime number is to help you with your insurance, but a lot of crime that's committed, yes, it's terrible, it's really bad, and the opportunists are out there committing it. But we ourselves are responsible for doing something about our own security. Why are we relying on the police who haven't got the resources? I wish they did, but they haven't. So it's down to us to protect what is ours. How many times do you see, just walk down the street, people put big boxes out saying, we've had a new TV set, or we've had this. They shouldn't do it. It's all common sense. Yes, burglars shouldn't be out there burgling and, wrecking people's property, but it is down to us to do something positive about our own security.
Do some police forces still have what I always thought was an absolutely brilliant public service, which was security experts within the force who, particularly if you've moved to a new home and, if you're lucky, it might be quite a big place or what have you, and somebody who really does know their stuff, one of the people you work with, will come along and say, look, that looks dodgy, you want to deal with this, I would recommend this, that and the other. Do they still have that?
Yes, they do. Crime prevention officers are still out there. They will come and advise you what to do. It is common sense, but they will advise you what you can do to protect your property. I would say, obscure the front window. Don't put the Christmas light on show. 2 locks on the front door. Use the second lock.
The mesh thing over the letterbox.
The letterbox.
What's your view on CCTV? Particularly the cheap and cheerful ones that are advertised constantly on television, which you can link up to your mobile phone so you can see who's rat-a-tat-tat at the front door.
Fantastic. Any system you put up is a deterrent. It stops you being a target. So, yes, and the cheap ones are just as good. So, yeah, if you can afford it, put an app on your phone, cover the front of your property and the back, and you'll find you won't be a target. It'll move on to the 99% who don't bother.
And again, the police accept that as evidence, even if it's on your mobile phone, like a
Depending
selfie.
If you've got a clear shot of the opportunist burglar, it's got to be very clear. They can't go on a fuzzy image. It's got to be very clear.
And in terms of not advertising what you've got, are you a stick it up in the attic man, or are you put it in the stairs under the cupboard man? If you've got stuff that you know isn't normally there around the base of the tree, but is going to mean the world to somebody on the 25th of December.
It's better to put things at the top of the house. Burglars don't like going upstairs, and if they do, they don't want to spend a long time there because they feel trapped. So the further at the top, the better. Keep bags out of the way, plastic bags, suitcases out of the way, so they can't fill your suitcase with your property and take it.
I have to say the packaging one was one that hadn't crossed my mind. I know the grill thing and I know the lights and so on, but the packaging is a very good idea. I've just bought a new telly, or I've just bought an X, Y or Z. Thank you so much for your honesty and for your wisdom there. Really brilliant, user-friendly tips, I hope, for you to hang on to and cherish what matters most to you, particularly in the run-up to Christmas. My new friend, Michael Fraser, home security expert and reformed burglar with a purpose. You're watching and listening to Alastair Stewart and indeed new friends, with lots more still to come on the programme this afternoon as we inch towards the end of our 2 hours. We'll have more on our top story discussion today, which is the UK's energy crisis. We'll also take a look at the controversial approval of a new coal mine in Cumbria. But first, let's take a quick break.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Mark Stein. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Dubes & Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Dubes & Kerr.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
Why not take us home with you by visiting the GB News shop at gbnews.store. You'll find all the official merchandise, a really good present actually for yourself, your friends or your family.
We ship across the UK mainland at no extra cost. GB News, the People's Channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
We are GB News, right across the nation. You can get us on television, on radio, on digital. We're absolutely everywhere.
Amazing! You see, amazing!
You remind me of me in the European Parliament. But here's the most important bit. We are not part of the mainstream establishment. We think and speak just like you do. We are the People's Channel.
Magnificent. That's really, really thoughtful.
Come and join us on GB News, the People's News Channel.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
It is a few seconds past 1 o'clock. Hello and welcome. If you've just joined us here on GB News TV and radio and online, Alastair Stewart and friends with you right up until 2 o'clock. Hello and welcome back, and thank you so much if you've been with us since noon. I am Alastair Stewart, and we are into our second and final hour of the programme, keeping you company here on TV, radio and online, with lots more still to come, including: should the government have allowed a new coal mine to be approved in Cumbria? I'll be speaking to a range of guests about that and what its implications may or may not be, and getting more, I hope, of your thoughts on that matter and on energy policy generally. So do keep them coming in. GB Views at gbnews.uk or via Twitter or Facebook. However you like to get in touch, do let us know what's on your mind, and we'll read the best ones out here on the programme. But first, let's bring you right up to date with all of the News Today. Here once again is Polly Middlehurst.
Alastair, thank you, and good afternoon to you. Our top story on GB News today. The Jersey authorities say the recovery operation following yesterday's explosion will take weeks, not days. At least 3 people were killed when a blast ripped through a block of flats in St Helier. No survivors were found and 12 are thought to be missing. The Chief of Jersey Police, Robin Smith, says sadly more fatalities are expected.
We are not going to be here for days. We are likely to be here for weeks, and it's important that I make that clear. This morning I spoke to the Family Liaison Coordinator who described to me the feelings of those families, and I am really keen to ensure that everybody properly understands the emotions that they are currently going through. So this is not going to happen quickly, it's going to happen carefully, and it's going to happen sensitively.
Meanwhile, the Nurses' Union has offered to press pause on strike action if the government agrees to hold talks on pay. The Royal College of Nursing has accused the Health Secretary of failing to negotiate properly, and thousands of members are now planning to walk out on the 15th and 20th of December. But, writing in The Sun, Steve Warkley warned the action will cause significant risk to patients and added the door remains open for further talks, but he didn't say whether pay could be part of that discussion. Meanwhile, postal workers are staging fresh strikes today. The Communication Workers Union says the action could risk a Christmas postal meltdown. More strikes are planned over the next couple of weeks as well, which means the union has warned there'll be a huge backlog of post. Royal Mail says the money allocated to the pay deal could now be eaten away by the cost of strike action. Now, thousands of soldiers are preparing to stand in for public sector workers, including Border Force and emergency services staff, when they walk off the job this winter. Speaking to GB News, Lord Ken Clarke said bringing the army in to cover striking ambulance members when he was Health Secretary didn't go down well with voters.
First time was when I had a 7-month ambulance strike, and we gave the country a much better ambulance service where the strike was effective by bringing in the army. But that was hugely unpopular with the public.
And you can see the full interview with Ken Clarke on Gloria Meets every Sunday at 6 p.m, and that's tonight at 6. Now, the cold snap, which has been causing travel disruption, is expected to continue throughout this week. Snow and ice has swept across parts of the UK, and the Met Office saying tonight overnight frost is expected to last until Friday, and a yellow warning for snow and ice still in place for parts of Scotland and southwestern England. Ukraine's president says over 1.5 million people in the southwestern Odessa region of his country are still without power following Russian airstrikes. Officials in Kyiv say electricity will be restored over the coming days, but has warned a complete restoration may take 2 or 3 months. Meanwhile, Moscow says its attacks are militarily legitimate and that it doesn't target civilians. President Zelensky, meanwhile, has described the situation as very difficult.
In total, Russian terrorists used 15 drones against the Odessa region, just during one night on Saturday. This is the true attitude of Russia towards Odessa, the attitude towards Odessa residents. Deliberate bullying, deliberate attempt to bring disaster to the city.
Now, Harry Kane says he takes full responsibility for England's loss in the World Cup quarter-finals last night. The captain says he's gutted and it'll take some time to get over it. Meanwhile, Gareth Southgate says he needs time to decide whether or not he has enough energy to continue as England manager. Supporters in Qatar have been reflecting on last night's result.
It could have went either way. Honestly, the game could have went either way. The whole thing, it was nip and tug between, but you've got to take your chances, and I don't think we did that well enough. France were clinical. And now we're going home a week early, unfortunately.
Yeah, you feeling okay? Yeah, a little dejected, despondent, deflated. But, you know, that's England. We've been here before. We know what to expect.
A little bit disappointed, but it's still, after that game, there's a lot of positives to take from it. So we're still positive about the future. And only 18 months to the Euros as well to look forward to.
You're with GB News. More news as it happens. Let's get back now to Alastair Stewart and friends.
Polly, thanks very much indeed. 6 minutes past 1. Michael Gove faced controversy this week after he gave a green light to the reopening of an old coal mine in Cumbria. The Levelling Up Secretary argued that it's an important move in the UK's growth strategy, but many see it as a confusing turn of events following Rishi Sunak's signalled support for more onshore wind farms. So is a new UK coal mine a means of creating jobs and energy security, or what Caroline Lucas MP has called a climate crime against humanity? Joining me live now is a good friend of mine on this programme, Lord Peter Lilly. There he is, former Conservative Member of Parliament in Margaret Thatcher's era, and of course with John Major as well, and is now a member of the Environment and Climate Change Committee. Peter, in your view, did those conflicting issues of the need for growth in the northwest, the creation of 500 jobs, supplying coking coal to the steel industry at home and abroad, did they outweigh what you might perceive as being environmental concerns and considerations, giving the wrong signals to the world, as Caroline Lucas has suggested?
No, I don't think there's any conflict at all. We've always taken the view in this country that the way to reach net zero is to phase out demand for fossil fuels, not to curb the supply of them. If companies go ahead, so while we're still using them, we'll need fossil fuels as the demand is gradually being reduced. If companies choose to produce more fossil fuels than are needed, they'll lose money. But if we curb the supply of fossil fuels, Britain does that unilaterally, then other people will step in the breach and produce it. We won't reduce emissions by one molecule. And if the world follows our example, which is a bit arrogant to us to suppose they will, but if they do, and they reduce supply of fossil fuels ahead of the reduction in demand, there'll be shortages, huge price increases, immense profits for the companies remaining producing fossil fuels, and we'll have done to ourselves in future what Putin has just done to us by cutting off supply. So it's quite sensible to allow people to produce fossil fuels as long as we're consuming them and reducing our consumption towards net zero by 2050.
Billy Moria was saying earlier on in the programme, Peter, that the absolute priority for the government at the moment is growth, investment, rebuilding infrastructure, getting the economy going again, almost at any cost, because if we do that, then more people will be in work, they'll be earning better money, they'll find real economic market ways to pay those ghastly energy bills. Are you seeing enough from this government on the growth agenda?
I'd certainly like to see more. One of the reasons we've seen a reduction in productivity growth since the financial crisis in 2008 is a decline in investment in fossil fuels in the North Sea. That was one of the biggest most productive industries there was. We've been phasing it out. I'm glad to say the government's allowing more investment in the North Sea, but it should be allowing people to drill for shale gas onshore, because that would come on stream much quicker, as well as allowing onshore wind, which can also come on more quickly than offshore wind. Those are two things that would contribute to growth and contribute to energy security at the same time.
Also suggested that rather than traditional renewables like the Sunak going slightly warmer on the onshore wind farms, Karen said that we should take a deep breath and invest in our brilliant educational and scientific heritage and go for more radical things like hydrogen, which we've made progress on in the past, and not just size will be, but also this new range of mini nuclear power stations that Rolls-Royce have ready to go if they get the money.
Yeah, certainly mini nuclear power stations seem to be an attractive option, and I'm surprised we've taken so long to get around to it, given that Rolls-Royce have been producing micro nuclear reactors for submarines for a long time, so they have a lot of the expertise. It's a question of scaling it up. And I hope we'll press ahead with that as rapidly as possible, but even so, that will take considerably longer than it would to bring on shale gas and onshore wind. And of course, we will need some backup as long as we're relying heavily on wind for when the wind doesn't blow, which people will notice it doesn't from time to time. So we'll need gas to provide that on-off supply of electricity, which, again, nuclear power stations are good for a steady base load, but you don't want to ramp them up and ramp them down again. It's not good for running a nuclear reactor.
Peter, you were in office during the turbulent time of trade union and labour relations reform under Margaret Thatcher and that government. You served with great distinction. Do you get the sense that Sunak has it in his spine to come to grips with labour relations and the right to strike, given what we face in our hospitals and on our railways?
Yes, I mean, certainly no government's going to outlaw the right to strike, but there have been limits put in certain sectors requiring a minimum service level, and I think he may well move ahead extending that obligation to the health service and perhaps, I don't know, other areas of vital services in the nation. That I wouldn't personally want to go much further than that, because once you have a direct conflict between the law and the right to work and the right to strike, that puts the law in jeopardy. We were quite cautious during the 80s, did it gradually, and made sure that it wasn't so much law directly impinging on strikers, but on trades union funds. And that proved quite effective.
Wise words of caution there from my friend Peter Lilly, based on years and years of experience, some of which I witnessed, as he knows, as an industrial correspondent at the time as well. Peter, great to see you. Thanks for breaking into your weekend to talk to us, and hope the rest of it goes well for you all. And lovely to see you as always. Thank you very much indeed. Lord Peter Lilly there with his thoughts on labour relations, the need for caution and wisdom, and fascinating stuff on growth, inward investment, scientific advice. Stick what he said and Karen Billamoria said together, and I think you may have a little strategy there that could help the UK economy and indeed help us all go forward. So let's pick up on that and run with the ball again, because I'm pleased to say that to discuss more on this story is former coal miner from Cumbria itself, David Craddock, and there he is. David, good of you to break into your weekend to talk to us. I think the thing that surprised me slightly, having covered the coal mining industry in the 70s and 80s, is that one of the reasons you support the reopening of this pit is actually that these are good jobs that young people will benefit from, and not only to be employed, but will benefit from the experience of being a coal miner.
Yes, sir, I believe that. Being the recipient of this scheme under the National Coal Board, where they took a young man fresh out of school, no qualifications whatsoever, sent me to college, which I finished up in with qualifications in mine ventilation and in dust control. So it was a great experience for me, and I would go back and do it all again.
Does it surprise you the degree to which people have muddled the reasons for this reopening, i.e. the production of specifically coking coal for UK steel and steel industries abroad, saying, oh, no, it's the wrong signal in terms of climate change and energy policy?
You're right in what you say. The operative word was signal. The Green are more bothered about virtue signalling to the fact that we haven't got a coal industry and will accept coal from anyone who'll produce it, regardless of ours being the safest, the cleanest and the greenest way of producing coal.
Although overwhelmingly it's people like your good self who are in favour of it, and most of the local leadership appears to be in favour of it. But there is talk of a legal challenge to Michael Gove's decision. How bad, in your view, would that be for your community and your part of the world?
Well, I've watched the process grow from the initial application by West Cumbria Mining and the delaying tactics that the Green agenda brought in. It's been 8 years since the first application. It was passed with no valid planning objections. a lot of emotion, but no valid planning objections by Cumbria County Council. The government called it in, and we've been waiting for 2 years for them. I listened intently to the inspector when he made his recommendations, and I could see no valid planning objections then, and I see none now.
How long, and you know the answer to this because it is your industry that you lived and worked in for so long, how long will it be before we can see this coking coal coming out of the ground and going along those amazing conveyors, ready to either be sent to steel plants in the UK or sent to ports for export?
It's going to be a while. It's not going to be an instant scheme. They have to go down to the coal. When I left in '84, we were on our way to the same coal. In fact, I've got a photograph of me sitting in one of the seams that West Cumbria Mining are going to exploit. It will take them time to get down over the old anhydrite workings, and so it could be a couple of years, I don't know, but I'm not into mining as it's done at the moment. Mining methods have changed since '84 when I was last there, so I don't know the equipment that's involved nowadays.
David, great to talk to you. Lovely to talk to a former miner, but also somebody from that community that is in the main welcoming this decision, and we wish you well. Thank you for your reflections and your words of wisdom. There we have it. David Craddock speaking to us from Cumbria, Whitehaven, where that pit is going to be reopened, and he speaks with the authority and wisdom of a former coal miner. Great to have him on board. Joined next by Tom Fyans, who is the interim chief executive officer of the campaign to protect rural England. Is rural England in jeopardy because of the reopening of one pit?
Well, I think, thanks, Alastair. Rural England is definitely in jeopardy from the climate emergency. So it's the biggest threat to the countryside that we face. So, yeah, it is. You're looking at a mine that would have 220 million tonnes of CO2 pumped into the atmosphere. It's just not a decision that's going to work for the climate. It doesn't work economically, and it doesn't work politically. So it's not a good decision. It's a very retrograde step.
I said in my introduction to all of these conversations, and we've spoken to a range of people, that what hit me most sharply was the coincidence of the Michael Gove decision on the White and Sunak putting signals out that government opposition to new wind farms was perhaps calming down a little bit so long as there was local support for them. I mean, in a sense, that's throwing the gauntlet down to you guys who want to protect rural England, and I can understand why acres and acres and acres of these great wind mill things can impact directly, we have a few near us, on the beauty of the rural countryside. So are you concerned that there's maybe less opposition at the heart of government than there used to be?
Well, look, I think as a countryside charity, if we're campaigning about the climate emergency, we need to acknowledge that we need renewables. We need renewable energy done well. We need to make a transition that's fair to rural communities, and that means sometimes having renewable energy. We're seeing a lot of sites for solar, and there will be some come through on wind now, no doubt, that won't be appropriate, and we would oppose those. But in principle, we need to do them well, and they can be done well if you get the right sites for them. So I think it does present a challenge to the countryside. We need to play our role as in fighting the climate emergency, but we need to make sure communities give consent to renewable projects and really support them and get behind the transition to net zero, because if we don't, the countryside is going to be underwater. It's going to be facing drought. Well, it already is. So, these are the kind of conditions that farmers are working in at the moment and communities are facing every winter. So, it's a very complex issue, but I think we have to move towards renewables.
Let me put to you two things on that. One is that Karen Billamoria, Vice President of the CBI, said, but you have to be realistic about renewables, whether it's wind farms or the rest of it, that they aren't really a permanent long-term replacement for liquid petroleum gas or natural gas. And what he went on to say, and Peter Lilly agreed with him 100%, is we need to get cleverer, because we've got hydrogen technology out there. Our universities and our science labs are full of brilliant young men and women who've got great ideas. Presumably you would encourage that as well, because we've got to get energy security, but we've also got to protect this green and pleasant land. I think you and I are at one on that.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and obviously we need to see innovation and we need to see technology advance in order to address these issues facing us. But that has to be done through renewables. You know, there's no point investing in an industry like coal mining now. The future is a green economy based, and that can provide jobs too. You know, we should be looking at home insulation at the moment as a massive rollout of home insulation and energy efficiency needed. That would reduce a lot of the need for energy in the first place, and we haven't done that. The government haven't done that. That's where the jobs could be green jobs. We need green jobs in renewable energy, in solar and wind turbine production, in areas like that, and green transport. So we need to make a shift if we're going to do that. There are technological answers to some of this stuff, but fundamentally, the biggest success story of the last, in getting carbon emissions down has been the increase in renewable energy. That's been working the fastest. We want to see lots of offshore wind. We do want, we are aware of the landscape impacts of some of these renewables, and we want to see that minimised. And there's an awful lot of energy that can come from offshore wind, and it's good that the government is seeing that and investing in that. But we've got to look at everything. Nothing can be off the table at the moment when we're facing such a crisis.
We've been discussing on this programme, and my friend Michael Portillo was discussing it on his programme earlier as well, and that is the supply chain crisis facing UK farming, and many of us who are proudly UK farming's customers, maybe poses a longer-term challenge to the preservation of our beautiful rural countryside. If the farms go to the wall, then we really do have a very serious, long-term, incurable problem.
Yeah, I mean, obviously CPRE is a countryside charity. We support farming and we work with farmers on those kind of issues. And the supply chain issues are often to do with the supermarkets, to be honest, having far too much control and having, driving prices down that puts certainly small farmers out of business. So we need to see a lot more of a responsible supply chain in food. I agree. But again, the biggest threat to food security in this country is actually flooding and climate change. Those parts of East Anglia at the moment where we produce a lot of our food is facing, sea level rises, and we're going to lose that productive land. So we've got to look at this holistically.
And invest in drainage. There's jobs there as well. We are at one on many issues there, Tom. Great meeting you, and good luck with the new job. I hope you enjoy it, and keep in touch with us. You're always welcome on this programme. That's Tom Fyans, who's the interim CEO of the Campaign to Protect Rural England, not just hugging trees, but talking a great deal of sense there about farming, industry and jobs. More of your thoughts. You may disagree with what I just said. Do let me know if you do. But we love to hear from you on all of the subjects that we discuss. Doug joins the conversation saying, even if we cover the country in windmills, produce more solar, nuclear, etc., we may be insufficient. It may all be insufficient itself, but still tie us to the international gas prices. We currently produce over 40% of our energy from renewables, but do not see the price reductions that deserves. I completely agree with that. It drives me bonkers that when alternatives are produced and supplied to us via the national grid, they are treated for tax reasons as if they were a great multinational like Shell or BP or someone like that. It bonkers, and it needs reviewing. Malcolm joins the conversation and says use wave, tidal and other hydro from rivers, reservoirs and pumped storage as they do in Scotland. So there are some thoughts there. Thanks for all of them. Food for thought. as always. Please don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. We are at GB News, where you can catch all of the interviews that we've done today and on previous programmes, and indeed you can catch those previous programmes as well, some of which I rather hope you might enjoy and find interesting. So that's YouTube, and we are at GB News. It's, what is it? It's about 20 to 25 past 1. We've a little more to go on the programme as we inch towards 2 o'clock here on Alastair Stewart and Friends, including reports that up to 15,000 operations are set to be cancelled next week because of the first national strike by nurses. Our reporter is live with the very latest from Northern Ireland. That and more after this short break.
Looking ahead to today's weather, and the UK is looking cold with some cloud and slow clearing fog and some wintry showers continuing at the coast. Let's take a look at the details. Cold in the southwest today and a little cloudier than recently, although some brighter spells further south. Showers will feed into those northern coasts and maybe wintry at times as well. Staying cold with persistent freezing fog in places and some wintry showers at the far southeastern coasts. A few brighter spells inland during the afternoon as well. Cloudy for most on Sunday, though the brightest at western coasts. Wintry showers continue, particularly over the hills. Feeling cold with some temperatures in the low single figures. A cold and cloudy day for most across the Midlands, with a few wintry showers there as well. Those will mainly be in the west. A cold and mostly dry day from northern England, with some patchy mist and freezing fog persisting into the afternoon. Brighter in the west and a few wintry showers skirting along the eastern coast. A band of wintry showers slowly moves southwards through Sunday with brighter spells behind. Light winds but continuing to feel cold despite any sunshine in Scotland. Sunshine and scattered showers across Northern Ireland, which may occasionally be wintry at times and mainly confined to northern coasts. Overall, it's feeling cold today with some wintry showers for most. They will stretch into the afternoon alongside some patchy mist and some freezing fog developing later.
I'm Mark Dolan. Join me at 11 on GB News for Headliners, in which I'll be joined by two of the UK's top comedians discussing tomorrow's papers. If it's an important story, we'll cover it, but we'll have some fun along the way. Headliners, the late night paper review that won't send you to sleep like the others will. 7 nights a week at 11 p.m. on GB News.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Mark Stein. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton Tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Lawrence Fox, on GB News. Frank, fun, fearless, and sometimes serious, much as I love a Friday night punch-up, what I really want is a battle of ideas. I want to look at things differently. I want to hear different voices and engage with your unique experiences. Every Friday at 7 p.m. on GB News.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8".
My instincts was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Alastair's here in just a tick. First, let me bring you up to date with the latest news headlines on GB News. And we begin with our top story concerning the events in Jersey, where officials say the recovery effort following yesterday's explosion in St Helier will now take weeks, not days. At least 3 people were killed when a blast ripped through a block of flats in the early hours of the morning, and 12 people are still thought to be missing. Chief of Jersey Police Robin Smith says, sadly, more fatalities are expected. Authorities in Scotland say a Libyan man accused of making the bomb in the Lockerbie disaster is now in US custody. Abu Aghila Massoud is believed to be the 3rd conspirator of the terrorist attack on Pan Am Flight 103 in 1988. A spokesman for the Crown Office says it'll do what it can to bring those who acted with Massoud to justice. The Nurses' Union has offered to press pause on strike action if the government agrees to hold talks on pay. The Royal College of Nursing has accused the Health Secretary of failing to negotiate properly, and thousands of members are now planning to walk out on the 15th and 20th of December. Writing in The Sun, Steve Barclay warned the action will cause significant harm to patients, adding the door remained open for further talks. And the cold snap, which has been causing travel disruption across the UK, is expected to continue throughout the week, with the Met Office saying overnight frost is set to continue until at least Friday. A yellow weather warning for snow and ice is in place for parts of Scotland and southwestern England. You're up to date on TV, online and DAB Plus radio. You're with GB News. Now, let's return to Alastair Stewart and friends.
Polly, thank you very much indeed. And indeed, as you heard in Polly's news bulletin just then, it is being reported that up to 15,000 operations could have to be cancelled or delayed by NHS trusts who have been instructed to ensure that affected patients are informed by Tuesday, with cancellation options being made available to them. They are under instruction to make those offers as soon as is humanly possible for very obvious reasons. However, 7.2 million people in England are currently on waiting lists, with more than 400,000 who've already waited for more than a year. For more on this, with a little bit of background, I'm delighted to be joined by GB News reporter Diggy Beattie, and there he is.
Well, hello, Alastair, and welcome to Newtown Ards. This is what you and I would have remembered as a cottage hospital, a community hospital. Northern Ireland has more hospitals than most per head. It has about 16 hospitals, 9 of them major, amongst 1.8 million people, and still has some of the longest waiting lists in the UK. We'll get to that in a moment. But Unison, the union, tonight at midnight will start their strike action, and it will be places like this that are hit the hardest, because Unison, of course, doesn't have that many nurses in its ranks. It does have a few, but it's mainly the engine room of the National Health, porters, lab workers. That's who they are taking out onto industrial action tomorrow, and that will of course have a knock-on effect on already heavily laden waiting lists. Now the RCN, the Royal College of Nursing, are taking a different approach. They're trying to say to the government, please come in, talk to us, we can sort this out, because of course they do realise that the public sector is paid for by the private sector, and if they get a wage hike, well then the private sector will want the wage hike too. And earlier in the week I spoke with Rita Devlin from the RCN.
Diggy? Didi Beattie
we don't appear to have
reporting
that
there
clip.
on what must be a seriously grave concern for everybody involved. And rest assured, GB News TV and radio and online will keep across that story, both in Northern Ireland and across the rest of the United Kingdom. You're watching and listening to Alastair Stewart and Friends, with plenty more still to come this afternoon, including I'll be speaking with magician and Britain's Got Talent 2016 winner Richard Jones. But first, a quick break.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not
believe in prison?
I don't believe in prison.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
The national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. B, I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8".
My instincts was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and tune-in apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other pay-per-review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
Hello and welcome back. You're watching Alastair Stewart and Friends here on GB News TV and radio and online. And thank you very much indeed for so doing as we inch towards the end of the programme at 2 o'clock. We're going to lighten things up just a little bit with a little bit of magic. See what I did there? Britain's Got Talent 2016 winner and magician Richard Jones joins me next to discuss his latest projects. He starred in Britain's Got Talent, of course, the Ultimate Magician and ITV Magic Competition, hosted by Stephen Mulhern, which will be on air next week for you to watch and reflect and remind yourself of just how incredibly good he was on Britain's Got Talent. In addition to that, he is embarking upon a 20-date tour running from February to June next year, full of psychological illusions, mind reading, audience participation and never-before-seen tricks. Richard, strikes me reading all of this that you are not a card up the sleeve or a rabbit in a hat magician. It's much more psychological, almost intellectual stuff that you do.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for having me on. First of all, I really appreciate it. Good to join you this afternoon. Yeah, so what I try to do, I spent 12 years in the Army. So what I try to do is combine some of the specialist training and the skills that I've picked up in my time in the Army and the stories that I've picked up as well. Try to combine all of that with my fascination with the art of magic, suggestion and deception to create something that I like to think is a little bit unique and very special. And it's always a very interactive show. And I always try my best to personalize my show to my audience. So whenever I get people onto stage, I'll try and leave them with a lasting message and a memory that they'll remember as a really positive experience forever. And that's also what I try to do whenever I'm on TV, which is obviously a big thing next week. Sunday is going to be the big day for Britain's Got Talent, The Ultimate Magicians. And then, and that's going to be a big day, and but then after that, my focus is going to be on putting together a brand new show for 2023 and getting around. And basically, it's my job to thank everyone in the UK for helping me get to where I am now, for voting for me in 2016. And my way of thanking them is putting on a brand new show every year and taking it around the UK and meeting everyone.
Fascinating. Does it make your friends and family slightly cautious about what they think about when they're in your company? I'm sitting here on the other side of the camera thinking, I've got to be careful now. He can read my mind even from a distance.
Yeah, no doubt it terrifies people at times because anyone who comes to my show will understand a little bit when they leave, will understand a little bit of how I work things out. So I do use a number of techniques, like obviously the obvious ones are body language reading and picking up subtle cues within not just what we say, but the way we say things, and also being able to input ideas inside people's minds throughout the show. Without them necessarily realizing all of those kind of big things that I find fascinating about psychology and misdirection and all of these different things. But like I say, I do teach a little bit about how that works in the show. So I like to think everyone will leave my show and go back to work the next week and be able to read a little bit of how their colleagues, what their colleagues think of them and what they're thinking.
Just for people who are listening to the conversation on radio, not watching on telly, because we do both, as you know, we're just running some pictures there of your days in the Army. I presume, a 20-date tour of the UK requires a certain degree of physical fitness and stamina, as well as magical talent.
Yeah, so it's a big undertaking. So I think it's actually 30 dates as far as I'm aware. So it's going to be, we've already had a few dates this year. We always, the year before, do a few dates spread around and that's our chance to obviously put on a show. But we're always kind of adapting and changing things as we go because my show is so audience interactive, it's very difficult to, you can make a plan, but just like anything in life, once you get into the process of doing whatever it is you've planned, things happen that you don't predict, you don't really think are going to happen, and you have to change little bits as you go. So, but the show, we've done it, we've road tested it now, it's all ready to go. But it's going to be about 30 dates, pretty much back to back. So it's going to be a lot of traveling between venues up and down the country. But I always try my best to make sure that after each show, I'll always try to go to the foyer and kind of thank people and say bye, and we have some photos with everyone who comes to the show, because it means a lot to me that people that get their family together to come out and spend a night seeing what I have. So I feel like there's a lot of pressure and a lot of importance that I put on making sure that I give them an experience that they really appreciate. So but it is tiring after back-to-back shows, but you know what, I love it. Even though it doesn't matter how tired I am, the moment I get on stage and I see the smiling faces of the lovely people in the audience, I get such an adrenaline rush from that.
Well, part of the great accolade of winning Britain's Got Talent is, of course, you took part in that absolutely amazing Jubilee lineup and rubbed shoulders with the royal family. And the then Prince of Wales, but now King Charles III, was incredibly complimentary about you. Mesmerising, I think, was the word he used. Does that mean that you can now say Richard Jones, by appointment to His Majesty the King, illusionist and magician?
Yeah, you know what? So something that that not a lot of people know is our king is actually secretly a member of the Magic Circle. So he did do an audition many years ago, way before I was a member of the Magic Circle. And there's a big iconic photograph of him on his audition day doing a very famous piece of magic, the cups and balls, where you have 3 cups and a ball and you kind of mix them around. And I've never met anyone who was at that audition, so I've got no proof as to how good he was, but he did pass the audition. But I assume even if he was terrible, he'd probably still would have passed that audition. Who knows? I don't know. But we do know that he loves magic, and I got him involved in my Royal Variety performance to a certain degree, and he seemed to really enjoy it. And whenever I see him and any of the roles, they'll. I mean that's the other thing. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter how good I am. They'll probably always be complimentary, no doubt. But I like to think it's genuine whenever I see the Royals, and they're always such great crowds. And I've been lucky to perform for them for many years, not just as a magician, but obviously as part of the army as well. I've done Troop in the Colour many times, and all of the big parades supporting the Royals and the big British occasions that we celebrate. So I feel very lucky, and I feel very attached to the royal family. I'm very proud to have served them for so long.
Good to hear you say that, Richard. Heartily agree with that sentiment. Congratulations on all that you've done up to now. Good luck with the Stephen show that's coming out a little bit later on, and most importantly, good luck with the tour. Hope it's an absolute success. So there you have it. Richard Jones, Google it, and all of the details are up on his website, and do pop and see him and see whether you agree with the King. It's always very dangerous when there's a squaddy around to disagree with the King. I suggest that you don't. Richard, great to meet you. Thank you very much indeed for your time. Now, apart from pantomime and watching magicians and great live shows, Christmas, of course, is also a time for giving. And all of the great charities out there, and there are very many of them, have their backs against the wall like the rest of us. And the next charity that we're going to talk about is one that is very, very close to my heart, because I am indeed patron of the Brook Horse and Donkey charity, and they have launched their Christmas campaign this week, the Healing Broken Hearts campaign, which focuses on the bonds between working horses, donkeys and mules and their owners to improve animal welfare. One of the key things that drew me to Brook is that although it loves animals as a charity, it isn't simply one of those, pat the lovely little animal and give it a cuddle charities. It recognises the relationship between human beings and working animals, and it's up to us to keep those animals as content and fit as possible so that they can look after us even better. I mean, it really is treating those creatures with the respect they deserve, but as an asset as well.
You're absolutely right, Alastair, and you're a better advocate for Brook than I perhaps could ever be. But I think one of the things that you touch on is the relationship between animals and people is the critical point. And if we can get owners of working horses, donkeys and mules, wherever they are in the world, to understand the needs of their animals, those animals are ultimately going to have a much better life. And we've seen the importance of it this year more than ever, particularly in things like in Pakistan, where those awful floods have displaced so many people, and where you've got nearly 40 million people relying on about 6 million working horses, donkeys and mules for their sustenance, for their livelihoods. And actually, it's our job to help not only look after them in the circumstances they find themselves in, but building that bond so that they have a much brighter future.
And in a sense, it's very obvious things, as you well know, and people who are kind enough to watch and listen to our programmes know. Sally and I have donkeys and horses, which we love and cherish, and so do our children. But it's things like dentistry. It's things like a farrier to make sure that those working feet are healthy and well protected. Easy in Hampshire. In Pakistan, Ethiopia, Somalia, Egypt, trickier.
Oh, you're absolutely right. I mean, one of the most distressing things that we see on the ground in those countries is the lameness in animals, primarily because they don't have proper shoes. You know, they are in extreme discomfort, and that affects not only their welfare, but it affects their ability to help their owners drive income, to fetch water, often from miles away in villages, to take goods to market. And one of our big initiatives has been training farriers in the developing world. And we opened the first farrier school in West Africa. It's become an enormous success, and we want to replicate that everywhere else, because it's some of those things are the unseen things that people don't think about.
I was terribly proud when I saw in West Africa as well with you the animal shelter, so that when humanity takes its produce, we were talking to a farmer a little earlier, and you go to market, and of course you've got a flask of water and you keep yourself in the shade when you can. Good to think about the working animal as well, who is making your living possible for you.
Well, you see these animals in boiling hot squares, no cover, no water, very limited feed. So one of the things we've tried to do is build shelters in cooperation and partnership with what we call the local governments in where we work, and they've proved to be enormous successes. And in a town that I visited in Senegal, the driving force behind it was the local mayor. He had seen the absolute value in this and was promoting it with us, and it was making a discernible difference to the animals, but also their owners, who suddenly had fitter animals, who were able to work longer, who had a much better welfare and would be an asset to them for a much longer period of time. So it's those sort of partnerships which are really making the difference.
We also talk on this programme a lot of about our hope and belief in the youth and future generations and apprenticeships and things like that. Another thing that I was knocked out by, because it was so obvious and it was such a brilliant idea, is working with the sons and daughters of rural communities and agrarian farmers and people like that, so that when inevitably they inherit the little farm or the little plot, and they inherit, hopefully, the animals as well, they too will know how to give that creature a better life, and that creature will therefore help give them a better life.
It's absolutely critical. I mean, all of us, when we grow up, we pick up habits, ideas, behaviours from our parents and our environment. And one of the things that we've been doing with young people, particularly in Kenya and East Africa, is challenging some of the myths. There was myths that the only way to get a donkey to work was to beat it. Quite frankly, and actually we challenged that and showed them it's not the way. And not only do they grow up with that, but they go home and tell their parents and say, actually, you don't need to do it that way. We've got a much kinder and much more responsible way to do it. And we really noticed the enthusiasm behind them, because, you know, these animals are often part of their family. And although they perhaps might not have the same bonds that you have with your horses, and I've seen your grandson Jim Jam also taking up the mantle of, you know,
just trying to explain to Jim Jam, hang on to the mane, but don't pull it and yank it.
Exactly.
The pony will go along quite well.
You'll be telling him that
you
early
used a very important word there, myth. One of the other great myths which causes you and me and the entire Brooke family grave concern is the myth which the Chinese indulge in more than anybody else, that like rhino horn, donkey skin can provide medication, some magical medication that will cure all evils or make you a bigger, better person or what have you. That's been a crucial campaign for us, but we've made some real progress.
Well, we have, and it's one of those campaigns that's pretty much been hidden. You know, we're all really familiar with trade in ivory and everything else, but donkey skins has become a burgeoning trade, a criminal enterprise in lots of cases, and there's been hundreds of thousands of donkeys that have been slaughtered for their skins to make essentially a vanity project called Iju, which primarily is used in the Chinese market. But Tanzania government's banned it, the Ivory Coast have banned it. We convened a conference last week with the African Union in Tanzania, and ministers right across Africa attended, and I really feel that the message is starting to get through now.
And the UN have embraced this as well.
But the UN have shown interest. It's often quite slow progress at UN, but we want the progress to be led by the countries which are most effective.
Are there any flashing red lights? Because it is Christmas time, and we talked about giving to charities, but also people buying unusual, strange gifts to look out for, to make sure that you are not supporting, by an inadvertent, almost accidental purchase, this ghastly trade.
Well, we talked to Amazon, for example, and colleagues in the US have been working with some congressmen to get it banned, but it's places like Amazon which can really take a lead on these issues and make a difference. If they don't stock the product, it can't be bought. hundreds of thousands of animals could be saved, but more importantly, their families who often sell these animals because of dire financial circumstances,
Crazy.
then live to regret it for a very long time.
Totally, absolutely. Chris Wainwright, it's always great to see you, always good to work with you as well. And thanks for coming in here to talk about what one of the great charities is doing this Christmas. And everything that Chris and I talked about is beautifully written about on our website. Just Google the Brook. And if you know the word equid, it means horse, donkey, pony, the whole lot. It's a couche, and it's a great charity. That's all that we have time for today. Chris, thank you for helping me end on a real high there. We'll be back next weekend, Saturday and Sunday from midday until 2. From all of us here at GB News and my guests, enjoy the rest of your day. Bye-bye for now.
Looking ahead to this afternoon, and the UK looking very cold with sunny spells and those wintry showers over the coasts and high ground. Let's home in on the detail. So, staying very cold in northern Scotland with snow showers feeding into northern coasts through the afternoon, perhaps brighter spells further east. Dry for most of Northern Ireland, but wintry showers at the coast and the brightest spells further west, feeling cold despite the sunshine. Then staying dry for northern England, but a few wintry showers further south. Patchy mist and freezing fog forming later, feeling very cold in the north. And feeling very cold too for Wales as well. Sunny spells in the west, cloudier in the east, a risk of those wintry showers returning, particularly over high ground, light winds, temperatures in low single figures. Staying cloudy for most of the Midlands this afternoon, mist and freezing fog lingering all day, brighter spells further south, but very cold as well. Generally dry across East Anglia, the best of the sunshine towards the coast, cloudier further west, with a risk of a few wintry showers skirting far east. And remaining cold across the southeast of England today, with brighter spells at times, scattered showers at the coast, sleet and snow inland.